It's been about 10 years since we heard anything about a new Silent Hill game from Konami. While the other forms of media kept it alive, such as comics, novels, and artwork, there's been no sign that a new game would ever be made again. It felt like there was a new curse on the haunted town, preventing the games from continuing. With Konami renewing interest in the franchise again, it's time for an updated Silent Hill Retrospective for 2022. In this Silent Hill Retrospective, we'll cover the games, movies, and some of the more popular novels. While the focus is on the games, we'll also lightly touch on a few other titles. The video and article will present the list in chronological order, but we'll list what type each one is. We won't go into too much detail for each one, as that would take forever. However, we'll make a plan to make separate videos for each one in time to come. We'll also do a Silent Hill vs Resident Evil article and video in the future. When Team Silent introduced the very first Silent Hill game for PlayStation in 1999, it brought a new sense of horror not seen in the world of gaming. Terror lurked in many corners, whether it was on the streets or within buildings. While the monsters scared many gamers at the time, it was the lore and story of the haunted town that caught their attention. The first game in the Silent Hill series focused on Harry Mason searching for his daughter Cheryl. It featured a third-person perspective, the camera following the character as he ran through the fog for any signs of her. As you discovered new locations or locked doors, the map was updated. There were also horrific creatures trying to kill you. During the game, you learn that Cheryl is a physical manifestation of Alessa Gillespie, burnt as a witch in the past. There were many locations that became iconic for the series. For example, Midwich Elementary was one of the first areas you explored, setting the tone for other destinations in the game. Some key features that became staples for future games were the flashlight, radio signals for nearby enemies, and save points. Of course, the number one element that set Silent Hill apart from other horror games was Otherworld. It was another reality that Harry found himself in during different parts of the game. Many elements were linked to original buildings, connecting the story you need to uncover. As would be another staple in the series, there were 5 alternative endings, with one of them being canon, and another one the joke ending. Team Silent returned in 2001 with the official sequel Silent Hill 2. With the success of the first game, they decided to keep many of the elements considered lore at the time. However, it didn't follow the protagonist's original story. Instead, it showed a new character drawn into the destroyed town, the fog surrounding him as he set off to discover why he was called there. The story of James Sunderland is perhaps one of the most popular and contentious in the series. To this day, you can find Silent Hill fans arguing in social media groups about the true meaning behind the game. There are so many different opinions, you could create an entire article on that alone. James ends up in Silent Hill looking for his wife after receiving a message that he should meet her there. Players discover later that she actually died from an illness 3 years before. The character soon discovers he's not the only one in the haunted town, meeting others that would also become hot topics among fans. It's probably the uncovering of what James did to his wife that shocked gamers the most. The sequel saw new monsters attacking James, but none set as much of an impression as the iconic Pyramid Head. Many fans argue that only James could see him, as this was his nightmare to live. However, this notion caused disparity with what would happen in future movies, comics, and other forms of media that wanted to include the famous antagonist. Team Silent wasn't done yet. Another sequel appeared in 2003, titled Silent Hill 3, which directly followed the storyline in Silent Hill 1. However, Players wouldn't know it was linked until late in the game, when it was revealed that the protagonist, Heather, was actually Harry's daughter Cheryl. Of course, she was all grown up in the game. As became the trend with the previous two games, you start with a scene where you die before you begin the actual story. A detective followed your trail, trying to explain to you who you really are, and why you're linked to Silent Hill. Otherworld takes center stage, but in a different way. As the story progresses, Heather realizes that she's responsible for the creatures in the town, and what's happening around her. During her investigation, she also discovers that Claudia is the reason behind her father's death, and calling Heather back to Silent Hill. With cults and the summoning of the new god in Silent Hill, Heather ends up having to face herself before confronting a new version of Claudia. While many of the creatures don't stand out as much as Pyramid Head, some of them share similarities with the monsters in the past and future games. Out of all of the games listed in our Silent Hill Retrospective for 2022, Silent Hill 4 The Room is by far our favorite. Originally, it wasn't meant to be a Silent Hill game. However, it was eventually converted to one, which is probably why it wasn't set in the haunted town. Instead, it heads to the south of Ashfield, one of the neighboring cities. You play the role of Henry Townsend, living in an apartment block. The longer you remain there, the more things start happening around you. Eventually, a massive hole appears in your bathroom, teleporting you to different locations. Some of them are in Silent Hill, such as the orphanage. As you meet new characters, they start dying, leaving you wondering what's happening. Radio reports and news discuss a serial killer called Walter Sullivan, who went on a killing spree before committing suicide. Yet the modus operandi is the same, making you wonder if Walter has somehow returned. One outstanding feature midway into Silent Hill was the spiral staircase that took you back to locations you've already visited. There are now more powerful enemies with the ghosts of the characters that died before. The final confrontation is, of course, with Walter Sullivan, with the ending based on the previous choices and actions. While it was clearly a departure from the previous Silent Hill games, it certainly became our favorite. The story kept us hooked, and trying to keep Aileen alive was probably one of the most challenging events. We hope Konami remakes it or follows up with a sequel. With the Silent Hill fanbase growing larger, Konami decided to move into the movie industry. Christoph Gans and Roger Avery teamed up to make the first film that was based on the first game. While it doesn't completely stick to the original gameplay and storyline, there are many elements that are the same. Instead of Harry searching for Cheryl, you have Rose looking for Sharon. Rose's husband, Christopher, heads to the real-life town of Silent Hill, only to find it in ruins. In the meantime, Rose is in an alternate reality trying to find their adopted daughter. A religious group called the Brethren is after them, trying to prevent the return of Samael via Alyssa Gillespie, manifested as Sharon in the real world. While the movie was popular among fans, there was one aspect that stood out above all the others. Pyramid Head featured in the game, which went against the plot of the first game. The gamers who state that Pyramid Head was only a manifestation of James's turmoil at the time had massive issues with the beast appearing in Alessa's storyline. Still, it was an impressive film that brought Silent Hill to our homes in a new way. We were able to see the characters and creatures move and fight before our very eyes, even if we didn't get to make choices for them. Gans did a great job directing the movie, even if it wasn't precisely portrayed as the first game. Before we move to the next official game in the series, we'd like to note 3 Silent Hill novels published by Konami in the same year the movie was released. They were written by Sadamu Yamashita in Japanese, and later translated into English online by several fans. The novels received mixed reviews from Silent Hill fans. Some praised it for remaining loyal to the games and following the main plot. Others indicated that the writing was repetitive and sometimes flat, missing the essence of the Silent Hill theme. The challenge comes in conveying the same sense of dread that the games and movies did. While the latter have visual qualities, novels are left to the imagination of the reader. In that way, the writer has to find new ways to bring vivid terror of Silent Hill to the reader's minds. With Team Silent no longer making Silent Hill games, Konami turned to Climax Action for the official fifth installment in the series. It was originally released on PSP, but it was later ported to the PlayStation 2 console. Once again, the figure of Alessa Gillespie makes a return, but this time in a prequel to Silent Hill 1. You play as Travis Grady, a truck driver that crashes in the fog and wakes up in Silent Hill. The game reveals that Travis ran into the house where Alessa was burned for being a witch, only to save her. He passes out from the smoke but wakes up with a determination to see if she survived. Once again we learn about Alessa's story, but from a different perspective. The original ritual to awaken the god via Alessa is revealed, and it's your job to stop it. Of course, you'll need to face reimagined versions of monsters and Otherworld once again. The main difference between Silent Hill Origins and the previous game is the focus on combat. You have better fighting skills with an array of melee and ranged weapons. It's clear that Travis is better equipped to deal with the monsters of the town. Here's a game for our Silent Hill Retrospective 2022 that not many gamers know about. Konami Digital Entertainment created the game as an arcade shooter, where one or two players use a light gun to fire at enemies on the screen. While it may not have received many positive reviews, it's still a side game in the series. The story features Eric and Tina, who head to Silent Hill for their own reasons. Eric is investigating a strange cult in the town that may have been involved with his grandfather's disappearance. Tina wants to meet her pen pal Emily, who sends her letters from the town. Friends from the two head with them to Silent Hill, but bad things happen to them along the way. Only Eric and Tina are left standing against nightmares that await them, facing an enemy at the end that Eric wishes to save. The arcade game also presents Pyramid Head in one of the Otherworld battles, causing unhappiness with many fans for using him in a non-James story. Konami Digital Entertainment also made Silent Hill The Escape for Konami in 2007. It was a first-person shooting game where you move your fingers on the screen to proceed and then tap to shoot. It featured different versions of the monsters we've seen before, such as the nurses. Once you beat the game with the human character, you can replay it as an alien. After that, you play it as a Shiba Inu called Mira. The last character you'll have in the tutorial is Robbie the Rabbit, who became the Lakeside Amusement Park mascot since its appearance in Silent Hill 3. Essentially, it features different levels where you need to obtain keys to escape. While you may still find mobile copies of the game, you won't really find them on popular app stores. Perhaps with Konami reviving the franchise, we'll see mobile remakes of games like these. Game Federation Studio developed Silent Hill Orphan 1, 2, and 3 for Konami on mobile from 2007 to 2010. They were point-and-click horror adventures where you visit an orphanage in the town. While each one has a different story, it's the first one that had the initial impression on fans. You take turns playing as 3 characters across 3 chapters. In the first two chapters, you play as Ben and Moon, investigating the orphanage while a voice guides you. Both characters die at the end of their respective episodes, leaving you with Karen at the start of chapter 3. We once again see the return of Alessa Gillespie. This time she whispers to Karen, who turns out to be a forgotten sister. It's revealed that Alessa made Karen kill everyone at the orphanage, out of revenge for how they treated her. With her memory restored, Karen tells Alessa she never wanted to do it, ending in a final boss battle. Unfortunately, it's challenging to find mobile copies of these games that still function properly. They were developed in JAR Java format, with many phones not being compatible. Double Helix Games took the helm with the 6th official game, Silent Hill Homecoming. It features significant upgrades to the graphics, with more of a focus on the combat system. With the main character being part of the Special Forces, he has some fighting skills to help him battle and parry monsters. The game starts in Shepherd's Glen, where Alex Shepard grew up. He finds that his father, brother, and many others are missing with signs on boards and buildings. After searching the town and seeing the catatonic mother, he heads to Silent Hill to discover the truth of what happened. After discovering that a group called the Order are behind a lot of what has happened, he starts remembering his past and what happened to his brother. His father and other members of Shepherd's Glen are also part of what happened, and Alex is a thorn in everyone's side. There are new members we haven't seen before, but one of them stands out as incredibly familiar. The boogeyman resembles Pyramid Head, with the same iconic shape on his shoulders, dragging a massive blade we've seen many times before. However, there are no epic battles with it like we saw in Silent Hill 2. Konami turned to Climax Studios for the development of Silent Hill Shattered Memories, originally created for the Wii and then ported to PSP and PlayStation 2 later. Since they worked on Silent Hill Origins in 2007, they wanted to take another stab at one of the original stories in the series. This time it was a reimagining of Silent Hill 1. There are two parts to this game. The first is someone speaking in a psychiatrist's office answering questions. The second part is playing Harry Mason again in Silent Hill, looking for his daughter Cheryl. Yet there's more of a focus on investigating and solving puzzles. As a matter of fact, you'll run away from creatures instead of fighting them in some of the scenes. For the most part, you'll use your phone and flashlight. There's also an icy dimension that's a stark contrast to the fires of Otherworld. Also, the story seems to diverge from the original, and you'll come across new characters. This is intentional though. Later you discover you are playing the distorted memories of an older Heather. Back in the psychiatrist's office, all your choices and answers from before present a diagnosis of your personality and traits. It's scary how many players found that the final report is true to their nature in real life. Konami Digital Entertainment returned 3 years later with Vatra Games, making the 8th game in the series, Silent Hill Downfall. It was the last official game in the series, despite many other spin-offs and side games. However, 2012 would be a massive year for the franchise, with another movie, 2 games, and high-definition collection of Silent Hill 2 and 3. Murphy Pendleton is a prisoner who is transported from prison after a murder takes place. During that trip, the bus crashes and he lands near Silent Hill. It takes some searching, investigation, and fighting brand new monsters before he finally ends up in the haunted town. The story revolves around Officer Anne Cunningham, who ordered Murphy to be transported in the first place. She believes he's responsible for her father landing in a vegetable state that resulted in his death. Depending on your choices and what you decide to do in the end, there are 6 possible endings. While there are instances of fog, the game relies heavily on rain, hence the name. The heavier the rain in Silent Hill Downpour, the more monsters appear once you're spotted. Sadly, many of the creatures you spot later look like modified versions of earlier creatures, simply recycling them. Still, it had an interesting storyline, even if the combat was somewhat awkward. We considered leaving this part out of our Silent Hill Retrospective for 2022, but we chose to leave it in. Konami saw it as a chance to revive some of the old games, specifically the popular Silent Hill 2. It wasn't really a remake, but rather many of the aspects were upgraded or improved, and Silent Hill 2 and 3 were available for PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. There was the new voice acting, and some of the combat and camera elements received improvements. However, Xbox players complained so much about the glitches that Konami removed that version, refunding Xbox gamers that had paid for it. The PlayStation version received several patches that seemed to help. Downpour and the HD collection weren't the last we saw of the franchise in 2012. Silent Hill Book of Memories appeared for the PS Vita, along with the Silent Hill 1 ending up for sale in the Vita store. Book of Memories was a dungeon crawling game much like the Diablo series with a top-down perspective. It was the first time that players could create a character for a Silent Hill game. Book of Memories saw you running around dungeons, killing monsters and collecting items. There were 5 different classes that you improved by gaining experience and leveling up, giving you more strength or other stats. Every stage required you to collect puzzle parts so you could solve the puzzle at the end and move to the next zone. There was an in-game merchant with a shop where you could buy new items to help you along. You also had to watch out for various traps. The story revolved around the character and class you created. The monsters and puzzles reflected aspects of their lives that they needed to overcome, while there were also other characters that it affected in the story. You also had specific alignments that granted abilities. MJ Bassett stepped up to direct and write the next movie, Silent Hill Revelation. The story was a direct sequel to the first movie, presenting an adaptation of Silent Hill 3. In other words, it follows Heather, now all grown up, as she is called back to Silent Hill to release Alessa Gillespie and summon the cult god. As with the first movie, Silent Hill Revelation had some deviations from the game it was based on. Her father, now called Harry Mason, is still alive, but is abducted by the Order into Silent Hill. Many locations remain the same, such as Lakeside Amusement Park and the shopping mall. The detective, Vincent and Claudia, make appearances and play their roles like in the game. However, Pyramid Head is back again. This time, Heather is aware that the Dark Being is Alessa's protector, so she uses him as a bodyguard in the story. As you can imagine, not many fans were impressed by this. The ending was more or less the same as Silent Hill 3, except for one factor. Harry is now in the foggy Silent Hill, with Heather, or Sharon, returning to the real world. There were Easter eggs to many games here. Harry's looking for his wife was a reference to Silent Hill 2. Travis picking Heather and Vincent up in his truck stemmed from Origins, while the prisoner bus heading into the fog related to downpour. The survival horror stage was becoming stale at this point. Franchises like Silent Hill and Resident Evil were becoming too predictable, and the third-person perspective wasn't as scary as it used to be. Both Konami and Capcom decided to pick it up a notch, and we saw the first-person horror teaser appear in 2014. The demo was simply called Playable Teaser, and was presented by Konami and Sony PlayStation at Gamescom 2014. Gamers sat down to an intense horror demo where they traveled through passages and rooms in a house. When they entered the last door, they ended up at the start again. However, walking through the house presented new events and items not seen before. It took several tries and players before someone finally broke the code and completed the demo. When they did, the famous actor Norman Reedus appeared on the screen with the title Silent Hills. It created a massive roar from fans worldwide with the official announcement of the game. Without going into too much detail, Hideo Kojima, creator of the PT demo and the upcoming Silent Hills, left the project in 2015 when they split ways from Konami. He went on to develop Death Stranding with Norman Reedus instead. Konami officially cancelled Silent Hills, leaving fans wondering what would become of the series. After all, Downpour was the last official game in the series since 2012. Having worked on a brand new Silent Hill horror novel since 2014, author Shaun Jooste published Silent Hill Betrayal in 2016, despite Silent Hill's cancellation. It featured a brand new story, characters, monsters, and puzzles, and wasn't based on any of the games. The plot follows Trevor, who has nightmares about Silent Hill. When his police friend calls him about the cops coming for him, he and the friend ride to the abandoned town where Trevor sees a figure on the road and crashes. It features similar locations to ones found in Silent Hill 1 and 2, with the protagonist exploring a few new locations only seen in the games. While his wife was found dead in her apartment from an apparent suicide, it becomes clear in the story that there was more to it than that. Everyone that was involved with the death confronts their guilt in Silent Hill, with Trevor fighting each of them as bosses. One of them becomes Bishop Pyramid, taking the form of the iconic monster in a new way, based on the Order of Valtiel, and their robes and hoods. Only a few monsters are similar to the ones in the games, such as nurses and doctors. However, many new ones are based on mythology that Trevor and his deceased wife used to study. They also take new forms based on how they represent each character in the novel. In the end, Trevor himself needs to atone for his sins. Jooste also included 4 alternative endings as a treat to fans. Five years after Silent Hills was cancelled, Behavior Interactive announced that they would be adding a Silent Hill DLC for Dead by Daylight. It featured the Executioner, Pyramid Head, from Silent Hill 2 as the playable monster, and Heather or Cheryl as the playable survivor. The location added was Midwich Elementary School, one of the iconic locations from the Silent Hill 1 game and Silent Hill Betrayal novel. With the new character came new skins, weapons and abilities. It added a new atmosphere to Dead by Daylight, even with it making no sense that the two characters were together. Even if you took Silent Hill Revelation, the movie, as the inspiration, Pyramid Head was seen as Alessa's defender and not her executioner. Technical aspects and deviations from lore aside, Dead by Daylight Silent Hill is great to play, but you'll need incredible skill to play as the executioner. He is one of the hardest bosses to play, with slow movements and strikes. You'll need to level him up a lot if you want to make an impact against survivors. After 10 years since the release of Downpour, Konami has finally announced new games and movies for the franchise. We covered all of them in the Silent Hill Transmission article, revealing the trailers for each one. Since this article is simply as a retrospective, we won't cover the new games or movie in detail until they are released. The game titles named so far are Silent Hill Townfall, Silent Hill Ascension, and Silent Hill F. As for movies, Return to Silent Hill will have Christoph Gans return as the director. He mentioned that it might be based on Silent Hill 2, which possibly means Shaun will return after heading back into the fog to search for Rose. Either that or it will be a direct adaptation, with James Sunderland looking for his wife, Mary. We're finally getting new Silent Hill content again thanks to Konami. We waited a decade for a new game and it's finally here. As you can see, it's been a long ride for gaming fans, but we're hoping for something new for a change. There has been too much of a focus on Alessa and James, and we need a different tale not to relate it to them anymore. Heaven forbid if any of them have Pyramid Head in them. Are you looking forward to the new games and movie? Which one was your favorite in our Silent Hill retrospective for 2022? Let us know in the comments. And thank you for listening and watching.